Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I know some of you might be confused on why I'm doing a Christmas game review in October. Honestly, I don't know. I'm just as confused as why this came out in September. I would have to imagine that sales are not going to be great right now. However, this isn't the only Christmas game coming out in October. Elf on a Shelf is also coming out soon. And yet another Advent Calendar game has already come out. This isn't the first Rudolph game that I reviewed before. There was a very mediocre one for the Wii. It was just a minigame collection that barely tried to replicate the movie or even the song. I'm happy to say this game is way better than that title, but that's not a huge hurdle to get over. I will say this is a fairly faithful representation of the movie. If you've never seen the movie or heard the song, it's about a reindeer who's been born with a nose that glows so much that Santa uses it in a snowstorm that happens in order to deliver presents. The game tells the story of the movie, but it uses shortcuts to get there. For example, there are no story arcs for anyone other than Rudolph, and even that isn't really there. Hermes is already a dentist in the beginning. Rudolph never goes out alone to save his friends, and for some reason Clarice is along for the journey, and she said she's a misfit. I understand why Cornelius, Rudolph, and Hermes think they're misfits, but why does Clarice think she is? They added in a multiplayer mode, which I couldn't test, because I didn't have anyone to test it with. I'm guessing that's why they added her in, even if it made no sense with the story. This is a 3D platformer, and those are incredibly tricky to pull off. You have to have great controls and camera, and this one doesn't have that. The controls were floaty and loose, but they were workable. The problems came with the camera. You have full control over it, and it moves very slowly. I wish there was a way to do quick adjustments. It was hard to do quick platforming challenges when you slowly have to move the camera around to see. The controls just got worse as time went on, especially when you have to do wall runs. Those sections were just terrible, and I could see kids getting very frustrated at that part. In the final level, you have to do an extremely tricky jump, and I have no idea how you're actually supposed to do it. I just kept jumping off the wall and hoping I got enough height to get to the ledge. It took me over 20 minutes to finally get it, and it should have never been part of the game. Imagine a 6-year-old child trying to do this as a required part of the game. Now, visually it looks great. I think they did a terrific job of replicating the stop-motion puppets from the movie. Everything has the perfect tone and feel from it as well. There are 4 open areas to explore. In these areas, you'll find bells and ornaments. The bells are the main collectibles, and you get it when you finish a puzzle, much like when Mario collects moons in Mario Odyssey. There are quite a few of them throughout the levels, and you kind of just stumble onto these puzzles as you're walking around, and they're there to distract you from your main goal. The ornaments, though, were just collectibles that were hidden around the map. Strangely, this was the main blocker of the areas instead of the bells. It didn't make any sense. Why not reward us for solving the puzzles of the area? Why not stick with the main collectible? Why did they sideline it so much? It gets to the point where I'm like, why am I even bothering to get bells? The red ornaments were fairly easy to collect. You just had to find them throughout the map. And a little exploration, you can do that. So there's no real challenge to it, unlike when you're collecting bells. It feels like everything is backwards. The only level where it cared if you collect the bells was the very first one. The rest of the levels use the ornaments to get you. 3 out of the 4 open worlds were well paced. The worst one, though, was the island of misfit toys. The island was ridiculously huge, and there's just too much busy work quests to do. Sure, there were bell puzzles all over the place, but the whole thing took hours to beat. 3 other open areas were much better, and usually took about 45 minutes to an hour. There was one level where you're in Santa's house, and depending on the angle that you're looking at, it had completely different proportions. From the outside, it looks like a normal house. From the inside, it's huge, and when you get on the roof, you can't even see the bottom. Why is it so inconsistent? There were hints which would tell you where you could find bells, but it only really focused on the bells and not the main objectives, which was annoying, since the bells were kind of pointless, unless there's a secret ending if you get them all. But I haven't found any indicator that that's the case. There were also smaller parts where you're sliding or running away from something. They have different paths, and it was quick but enjoyable. There are also 3 boss fights in this with the Bumble. They're broken down into 3 different phases each time. They're not that hard, and they don't make you start over if you die. You're going to leave off at the phase you were just at. The level of difficulty would be low if it wasn't for the terrible jumping platforming sections. They often have you jumping in different directions, and it was very frustrating to do it, especially when you're on a timer. Throughout the adventure, you're going to hear the music from the movie, which I thought was great. It was one of the biggest complaints I had with the Wii version, where it only used the song in the credits of the game. But it's all over this title. That's until you get to the credits and you get this. Nothing. Why not just keep the song going? The lack of the song in the credits was just so jarring. This is partially voiced, and that's a real shame. I did like the voice actors in this, and they fully voiced the cutscenes, however not in the world itself, and it feels like it should have been. This is a kid's game, and they should have gone the extra mile to make it so the kids who can't fully read are able to follow the story. I did have some issues with the ending. They talk about going to the island of misfit toys, but they never actually showed them going there. It was one of the best scenes in the movie. Plus the ending I mentioned is just a musicless credit roll. Why not have us drop the toys while the credits roll? It would be faithful to the movie. Like always, I tried to break the game, and I mostly couldn't do it. There was one part in the very beginning I think I might have broken it. I was testing out the borders, and I was able to get way past what I thought the level borders were. I don't know why this would be here on purpose. Why is there a huge flat area that has nothing out here? I was constantly able to get out here, and the other side was locked, so I have to assume it's a broken part of the game. But like I mentioned, you can't do much out here. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was mostly well-paced. The only bump in the road was that dragged-out level with the misfit toys. They just didn't need to make it so large. At least there's a teleport system, so you don't need to walk around this huge island. Now, this is normally $39.99, and I would pick this up on sale. It's a very faithful adaptation of the movie into a game, and if the controls and camera were better, I might actually recommend it at full price for kids. I can see kids liking finding bells by solving little puzzles, but I do wish they had more use to them. If you're looking for a Christmas game for your child, they might like this, but wait till it's on sale.